Richard Alcott was a man driven by a singular obsession. He had an insatiable fascination with women's breasts, their shape, their size, their feel. Everything about them drew him in. It was an obsession that guided his relationships and dictated his interactions. His friends joked that he had a radar for large-breasted women, but Richard never saw it as a joke. He dated women who fit his ideal, often not caring much about their personalities or interests. He was a man of means, using his wealth and charm to attract women who met his criteria. Yet his relationships never lasted long. Women soon realized that his interest was superficial and purely physical, but Richard didn't care. There were always other women to pursue. One evening at a bar in downtown Manhattan, Richard spotted a young woman. She had an air of mystery about her. Her eyes, dark and deep, seemed to hold secrets, but what captured Richard was her full, voluptuous figure. He approached her, his intentions clear from the start. Her name was Nadia, a gypsy with a past full of magic and curses. Richard was drawn to her, not knowing the path he was about to walk. He saw only what he wanted to see, another conquest. Nadia was unlike any woman Richard had met. She spoke of things that intrigued him, and her beauty was intoxicating. They spent several nights together, each encounter deepening Richard's fascination. But Nadia was more than she seemed. She had powers ancient and formidable, and she sensed Richard's true nature. Richard, oblivious to Nadia's magical heritage, continued his pursuit. He believed she was just another woman to add to his list. One night, after a particularly intimate encounter, Richard's true intentions became clear. He spoke of other women, of his desires, and of how Nadia was just another in a long line. Nadia felt the sting of betrayal. She had thought Richard might be different, but he was the same as the others. Anger mixed with sorrow as she realized what she had to do. Richard had to be taught a lesson, one he would never forget. She whispered ancient words, invoking a curse that had been passed down through generations. Richard felt a strange sensation, but brushed it off as the effects of alcohol. He left Nadia that night, believing he had conquered another heart. Little did he know his life was about to change forever. The curse took hold slowly. Richard started to feel a strange craving, one he couldn't quite understand. It began subtly, a desire for milk, but not just any milk. The source mattered, and it had to be fresh, warm, and from the breast of a woman. He tried to ignore it, but the craving grew stronger each day. Richard met a new woman, Emily, who seemed perfect. She was everything he desired physically, and she was kind and caring. They quickly became close, and Richard felt the urge to share his strange craving with her. Emily, though taken aback, was understanding. She believed it was a harmless kink, one she could indulge. The first time Richard suckled from Emily's breast, he felt a rush of energy. It was intoxicating, and he realized that the craving was not just for pleasure. It was a need, deep and consuming. Emily started producing milk naturally, a response to Richard's demand. Each time he drank, he felt younger, more vibrant. At first, Richard was thrilled. He looked in the mirror and saw a younger man. His skin was tighter, his hair fuller, but the effects were more profound than he anticipated. He was not just looking younger, he was becoming younger. Emily noticed the changes in Richard with a mix of fascination and concern. He looked younger each day, but his behavior also began to change. He became more dependent, more needy. What started as an occasional indulgence became a daily necessity. Emily found herself producing more milk than she thought possible, her body adapting to meet Richard's demands. Richard tried to understand what was happening. The thrill of youth was overshadowed by the realization that he was regressing. He tried to stop, but the craving was too strong. Each time he drank from Emily, he felt a rush of vitality, but also a step back in time. He became more desperate, more insistent. Emily loved Richard, but she struggled with the reality of their situation. She watched as the man she loved turned into a younger version of himself, day by day. The physical changes were undeniable, but his mind remained sharp. He was aware of every change, every regression. His clothes became too big, his voice higher. Their relationship changed. Emily became more of a caregiver than a partner. She tried to limit the breastfeeding, but Richard's desperation made it impossible. The bond between them was tested, stretched to its limits. Richard's transformation accelerated. He went from a man in his 30s to one in his 20s, then teens, and finally a child. Each stage brought new challenges. His body was young, but his mind and desires remained adult. Emily struggled to care for him, torn between love and fear. She couldn't abandon him, but each feeding brought him closer to infancy. Emily sought help, consulting doctors and specialists, but no one could explain Richard's condition. They found themselves isolated, trapped in a bizarre reality. Richard's cravings grew stronger, overpowering his will. He needed Emily's milk to survive, but each feeding regressed him further. The strain on Emily was immense. She struggled with the demands of motherhood and the emotional burden of watching Richard transform. Her love for him kept her going, but it was a love that turned into a painful duty. She couldn't refuse him, even as she watched him turn into a toddler. Richard, now physically a small child, was fully aware of his condition. The curse had trapped him in a body that regressed with each feeding. He tried to communicate, to find a way out, but his body betrayed him. He was a prisoner in his own skin, a paradox of youth and awareness. Richard's regression reached its climax. He turned into an infant just 3 months old. His body was small and fragile, but his mind remained sharp, trapped in a baby's form. Emily, overwhelmed and heartbroken, continued to care for him. She couldn't abandon the man she loved, even as he became a child. Emily's life transformed into that of a mother. Her days were filled with feeding, changing and nurturing. Each time she breastfed Richard, she felt the weight of the curse. She saw the intelligence in his eyes, the silent plea for help. She knew he was aware, but there was nothing she could do. The curse was permanent, an unbreakable bond between them. Richard's new form was a constant reminder of his past actions. He had betrayed a gypsy woman, and now he paid the price. His mind screamed for release, but his body was helpless. He was a baby, forever dependent on Emily's care. The curse had sealed his fate, a punishment for his arrogance and betrayal. The story of Richard Alcott ended in a cruel twist of fate. He was a man who sought pleasure without consequence, only to find himself trapped in a perpetual cycle of youth. His mind remained adult, but his body was a baby's, fully dependent on the woman he had once dominated. The curse was eternal, and so was his awareness of it.